Okay, so for today's program, so before Jingsu starts the recitation for Project 4, Jingsu and we have a special guest, Edward, who will be talking a little bit more about the Ego 4D dataset and the work that they've been doing for that. So I'll let Edward introduce himself. Yeah, okay, so everyone please give a warm welcome to Edward. He can't be here, unfortunately, so he's joining us by Zoom.
Thanks, Phil. Hello, everybody. So yeah, sorry I can't make it today, but I'm here to present a brief snapshot of some of the research that's happening in the music collection group under Professor Shi at the moment. This group consists of me, Jingshu, and a couple other graduate students. And my goal today not only is to sort of explain what exactly the Ego 4D dataset is, but also just give you a brief primer on what topics might be interesting to do final projects on, and sort of, give some inspiration beyond the standard cut and dry like object detection or face swapping. So a little bit about me. Hello again. My name is Edward. I graduated last May, and I was a DMD major in engineering and an entrepreneurship concentration in Wharton. I graduated from undergrad, and I'm currently in the process of applying to PhD programs. And the reason why I'm applying to PhD programs is I think that research is truly one of the most interesting places that you can be, because not only does it give you sort of the freedom to be almost creative in a way, to find ways to solve problems in creative ways, but also I just think the technology is super cool and it almost verges on being like magic. So, but the thing is, I'm a DMD major, right? So why am I in computer vision? I should be a graphics person, right? Well, back around the end of junior year, I decided to embark on this PhD quest. So in order to figure out what was going on in research in graphics at the time, I went to SIGGRAPH, the Special Interest Group for Graphics Conference. And, I flew out to Vancouver on my own dime and had to stay in a hostel with like 6 other guys. But I went there to check out what was going on in the research space. And I found that half the conference was just deep learning and computer vision. And a lot of those topics were really intriguing to me. So I came back and I decided I need to learn more about this computer vision stuff. And I took this class, this specific class, to sort of embark on that journey. So to sort of summarize what I think is really interesting in the areas of visual computing right now, visual computing just being the umbrella term for graphics and vision at the moment, are these things that I have laid out before you. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but I think it is, at least for me, 5 of the most interesting areas that are currently being investigated in the area. So classification and segmentation, those all sort of fall into the same area. This is a pretty classical computer vision problem, which is given a picture, where's the car in this picture? Where is the human in this person? Can we draw a mask around this human? And because of the advent of deep learning and their novel architectures, what's really interesting in this area is the emergence of some foundational models that are able to reliably complete these tasks, because for a long time classification was constrained to a set number of total classes, whereas now a foundational model like SAM, Facebook's segment anything model, is able to predict an arbitrary number of classes. It's not constrained on anything. For neural scene representations, this is based on the seminal work of neural radiance fields. If you're in robotics, I'm sure you've heard of it. If you're in graphics, I'm sure you've heard of it. The idea is some people at Google Research in Berkeley had the brilliant idea of encoding a scene representation not as vertices and edges and faces, but instead as a neural network. And using that, we're able to learn a 3D scene representation from a set of posed 2D images, which is super helpful because now to obtain 3D information, you can just use some pictures from a standard camera, as long as you calibrate it properly and you don't need to use expensive things like LiDARs. I think pose and gaze estimation are very interesting because they serve as sort of machine learning extensions, and also to an extent just geometry extensions of the concept of motion capture. Because at its inception, motion capture was all about measuring how infrared light bounced off of certain polarized balls that you had to wear on a suit. But with the advent of deep learning and lots of training data, we've sort of been able to begin automating that away. So instead of needing to have a whole accelerometer-based motion capture suit or your classical infrared mocap system, you can just use a monocular camera system and get full body poses. In terms of gaze, which I believe Yiming discussed on Tuesday, gaze is also very interesting, not only because it is able to give us insight into the attention of the person being monitored, but also it is able to be an interaction device for AR and VR user interfaces. So all that's very interesting. If you've been on X or Twitter recently, I'm sure you've seen generative models being the rage, all the rage. There are diffusion models and GANs and transformers, and all of this is very interesting because based on previously existing information, we are now able to generate new information out of seemingly nothing. There are some ethical concerns there, but in computer vision and scene reconstruction, very interesting applications would be to generate things that are occluded. When there is a picture of something and it is behind, say, an obstacle, using generative models, it is possible to hallucinate what is behind there and get more information than there actually initially was inside of the image itself, which is very helpful if we're trying to train a comprehensive model that is able to replicate the world. And finally, for a long time, computer vision has been sort of confined to the areas of doing operations on two-dimensional images. And yes, you can do sort of segmentation algorithms on 3D models, but here I'm saying that the third dimension to consider is time, because even when you do pose estimation for like computer vision based motion capture, what's happening is every single frame is being processed individually. Whereas most people in our reality process movement as a sequence of things that is continuous throughout time. And when you do algorithms purely on static images in sequence, some of that higher dimensional semantic information that is encapsulated in movement is not captured. And what's really a big hurdle in processing this long distance video understanding is basically just compute, because 4K image, that's a lot of pixels. Give it RGB, that's 3 times the pixels. And now if you have a minute of a 60 FPS video, that is now that times 3 times 3,600. And in terms of the teraflops that we have to process, that's certainly a lot. So all of these are areas that people are sort of investigating at the moment. And for your viewing displeasure, I have outlined them in terms of how I personally think they are related. This is by no means comprehensive, but you can see that everything sort of is related to each other. For instance, by properly segmenting out the objects that exist inside of a video, you're able to track it, which guides in long distance video understanding. You can use generative models to generate facets of neural scene representations that are occluded. Classification and segmentation can inform gaze predictions, because if you are tracking the gaze of someone, their chances are they're focusing on some object, et cetera, et cetera. And all of these areas and these areas themselves and the arrows connecting them, each of them is a research direction. And if you're able to come up with some arrow connecting like that doesn't exist already, that is also a potential new novel area of research to go down. So briefly, in terms of some core concepts to master in order to sort of be fluent, not necessarily fluent, but like have a general idea of how everything is built up, Here are some core concepts. Homography is super important, which I think is today's recitation. And it's super important for extracting 3D information from 2D information because it's how we reconcile camera views. Optical flow is very important for tracking objects as they move throughout images. Image pyramids capture high and low frequency features, which are the backbone of convolutional neural networks and general deep learning architectures. Convolutions are super important because that's just the operation to process 2D images. Gradient descent is super important because that's how models learn. If you want to design a model, you need to make sure that it can properly do gradient descent, otherwise it's not going to learn. And finally, attention is a bit of a newer metric, which measures the relationship between two pieces of information. And this is the backbone of very cutting edge generative models like transformers, and that's how we get things like ChatGPT. And the good news is that 5 out of 6 of these concepts are covered in this class. I understand that a lot of this class seems a bit far removed from the earlier research directions that I mentioned, but all of these foundational topics are super important in order to understand like the core mechanisms that drive these state-of-the-art research directions. So with all of that, hopefully that's some inspiration for your final projects. But what is our music collection group actually up to? Well, it's not just music. We collected videos on dance, cooking, and musical instrumentation, those instruments being piano, guitar, and violin. And all of this is part of Ego4D. Ego4D is this massive data set of hundreds and hundreds of hours of footage of humans doing human things. And it is a collaboration between Meta's Facebook AI research team and a consortium of several other universities. And I've had the pleasure of meeting a lot of the principal investigators across the consortium. And a lot of this is driven by reconciling egocentric video, which is first-person video, and exocentric video, which is third-person video, using these nifty devices called ARIA glasses, which are these they're the same form factor of a regular pair of glasses, but they have cameras built into them, which get these nice wide field of view first-person videos for very interesting gaze analysis and generally interesting data. So based on this web of topics that I've outlined, what is this data set even for? Well, it's for all of it, okay? I have outlined the fact that it is video makes it prime content for analysis in long-distance video understanding. A lot of these things, because there are so many multiple views, can be used to generate neural scene representations of these actions happening in real time so that we can get 3D versions of it. Pose and gaze estimation are very, very tightly interwoven into the processing of egocentric video and full body motions like dancing. And also, more lightly in terms of classification and generative models, they also have applications based on how they're connected to the more deeply green image categories. So there's a video here. So for me specifically, I'm working with another graduate student. His name is Kuyan. And we were tasked with segmenting out and creating a 3D version of the hands of people doing musical instruments. Because if we have that information, we can analyze how the hand pose evolves and potentially the movements. And using NUS2, which is a neural scene representation architecture developed by another Penn professor, Lingjie Liu, we were able to get this, which isn't bad. It's also not great because you can see the fingers begin to merge together a little bit. So the current goal is to inject some semantic information into that neural scene representation. Now this works as the integration between segmentation, classification, and neural scene representations, because here we are able to potentially tell people the difference between this finger and this finger so that even if they're close together, it knows that they're two different objects. And this involves using SAM and understanding how SAM learns what an object is and seeing if we can integrate it into the core architecture powering the neural scene representation of NUS2. I'm also going to hand it off briefly to Jingshu to let him explain what he's currently doing with the data.
Okay, thank you, Edward. Yeah, so this is kind of related to part of my previous work. We were trying to do pose estimation, and specifically, we're interested in estimating the human pose. And yeah, here is just example about how we do that. So given an image which has a human in it, we just run some inference of the model, which could provide us a list of key points. And here it just describes the location of those human joints. So as you can see, we have a list of white dots. And if you just plot them out, it could forms a skeleton, which is very simple, yet also effective to describe the basic human shape. Or we could estimate the entire humans with some volumetric model, which is shown on the right. So it looks would be more intuitive. So yeah, that's just part of the work of it.
Thank you, Jingshu. And this ties the relationship between pose and gaze estimation, which can eventually inform long-distance video understanding. For instance, understanding the level of skill of a person performing an activity. So that's it for us. It was a pretty breakneck trip through what we're currently working on and some potentially interesting areas. If you're interested in learning more, there is a undergraduate reading group. It's led by William Liang. They meet every Monday and they go over some foundational papers. If anything, it's probably not a bad opportunity to just get more experience reading academic papers, because there's some interesting stuff in there, but usually it's just very obtusely written and you need to sort of understand how this information is shared amongst academics. We also have a Slack, so if you're interested in contributing or working on these projects, you can email me or Jingshu, and we'll see if we can find a spot for you in our Slack. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward.